You're listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting us spend some time with you. I am being carefully monitored and supervised.
Yes, you are. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
And after the day we've had, I probably need it. It's springtime, and we've been gardening today.
Yes, we have.
And, I know some of you are out there going, well, I hope you watched for the signs. And yes, I try to do that. But, sometimes you have to do things when the ground is right, not necessarily when the sky is right. And after the spring we've had this year, it's been kind of a cold, wet, nasty spring. There's just some things that had to get done. So they got done today. If you like what you hear, just a friendly reminder that those share buttons and like buttons just make it easier for people to find us, just like you did. So we hope you take advantage of that. If you haven't been to GiveGod90.com lately, that's there for you to look at. Author Jerry Mitchell's where the books are sold, and hopefully all of the advertising is done. I think. If I think of something, I'll mention it later. Going to look at something today that's a little, well, it should be common knowledge, but it's not, because we don't think about it too much today. But, I think when I explain it, you'll understand it, I hope. Have you ever had or ever been in a conversation and asked someone a very complex question? And they answer almost before you finish speaking, right? You're asking the question and they're trying to answer even before you finish. Now, I know I asked some fairly in-depth and detailed questions. So when someone answers either in an offhand way or they answer and I can tell that they didn't think about it or they really don't know what the answer is, or worse, they try to give an answer that they really don't understand. They're just repeating something they've been told. I lose a little respect for that person, right? Now, a friend of ours was asked a question the other week, and he did exactly what he should have. He told the person to allow him some time to put an answer together that was biblically sound and understandable. Now, while the person asking the question probably wanted an immediate answer, I'm sure that they were much more confident that his answer would be founded in biblical authority and not just some offhand response. Sometimes you have to think about what you're going to say, right? And I really hope that we all give more appreciation to someone who's willing to take the time to give an answer that is well-researched, well thought out, instead of the usual flowchart answers that a lot of people want to give, right? When I was a lot younger, very, very, very much younger, I was in a training session, and the instructor who was teaching gave us a training tool that I have actually adapted for a lot of things. Now, the training was for an emergency situation, and the instructor said, when you're faced with an emergency, you need to stop, think, and get control of your emotions, right? You just stop, think, and get control of yourself. So think about this. 1 Peter 3:15 tells us, always be prepared to give a defense to everyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that is in you, but respond with gentleness and respect. I have heard that misused so often. Some people think we need to defend our faith. And yes, I did look at the critical resources for this and the critical apparatus for this. And the word defense there is not used in each and every one of the original manuscripts. Some say just give an answer. Some say give an account. But, you don't have to defend your faith. That's not what it's saying. It says you are to answer the reason for the hope that you have. Big difference than what a lot of people want to make it out to be. We're supposed to explain the reason we have hope. And we're supposed to give that answer with kindness and respect to the one who's asking. But here's the problem. How is someone who is hopeful supposed to respond? And that kind of depends on the conversation. It depends on the person who's asking. And it kind of depends on how much they really know about your faith, about you, and, about our Creator in general. But the other part of the equation is, how are you able to offer an explanation of hope if you don't know the difference between redemption and salvation? You see, if you don't know or understand what you're going to be answering, you can't give that defense. You can't give that explanation. You can't give that account. And by the way, if you don't know the difference, I just did a teaching on that topic for Messianic Delaware last week, and feel free to go to their website. The Zoom video is there, as well as the PowerPoint slides are available, and it's all free. So if you want to know the difference between redemption and salvation, it's there for you. What if you're not speaking about, faith? What if you're not speaking about religion or religious matters? You might find yourself in a conversation about something that you may know everything there is to know about, and the other person only knows, some misinformation that they've been told that is completely, inaccurate, right? If somebody who's never baked a cake is talking to a baker, the baker's got to be able to respond to the questions in a way that this other person who is completely ignorant of baking a cake, they just don't know anything about it. He's got to be able to explain that to them in a way that makes sense, right? You don't argue with them, especially when you know what you're talking about and they don't. You try to explain it in a way that they can understand it, and you hope that they grasp what you're saying. Now, Proverbs actually gives us some wisdom about this, if you'd like to read that particular verse.
If a wise man goes to court with a fool, there will be raving and laughing with no resolution. Proverbs chapter 29, verse 9.
In other words, you can't argue with a foolish person. And a foolish person is someone who thinks they know everything there is to know about a topic when they have no clue what they just don't know. Yep, I know exactly how to bake a cake. I know all about it. All you need is a box mix and a pan, and you're good to go. Well, a real baker is going to look at that person and say, you need to know a little bit more than that, right? And here's where I need to give some sound advice. If someone asks you what time it is, you have no need to tell them how to build a watch. Okay? Plain questions need to be answered with straightforward answers. However, the flip side of that, if somebody's asking you a very detailed question, your answer should be equally detailed. But again, the problem happens when the one who's asking the question doesn't have the information or the knowledge to understand the answer. And if someone is asking a question, even though you're knowledgeable, if you don't know how to deliver an answer that they can understand, you might as well be speaking two different languages, right? I was extremely fortunate when I was growing up and I was in school. I had a chemistry teacher who was absolutely brilliant. And he gave us a test one day, and I knew the answer, but what I couldn't understand was why one of the elements that were involved, would not be absorbed into the equation when in my mind it should work mathematically. So I asked, and it was a very detailed question. And when he smiled, I knew exactly that he knew what I was asking. And I'm not going to bore you with a long answer, but the short answer was, some elements, even though they should bond with others, they refuse to do that. And in that particular equation, the hydrogen was left over as a byproduct. My teacher, though, he realized that I was the only one out of the class who didn't just accept the answer. I wanted to know why that answer was correct. And he took the time to explain it to me in a way that I could understand it. I still think it should work, but it doesn't. It's just the way chemistry works sometimes. He was willing to do the hard thing. He was willing to give me an answer that made sense, and it wasn't just this one-size-fits-all response. Think about that. He was willing to do the hard thing and give me an answer that made sense. So let's look at another piece of Solomon's wisdom, if you'd like to read those two verses.
Don't give a foolish person a foolish answer. If you do, you will be just like him. But answer a foolish person as he should be answered. If you don't, he will think he is really wise. Proverbs 26, verses 4 and 5.
Oh, if only more people in the world would do this today. Hey, here's where I get to get a little preachy, just a little bit, I want you to think about this. If someone says, I'm a rabbit, right? The person responding says, okay, you're a rabbit. Now the foolish person has confirmation they're a rabbit, right? The wise thing to do is not answer foolishly, oh yeah, you're a rabbit, okay. The wise thing to do would be say, no, you are not a rabbit. You're a person. Get your act together and get right. So yeah, I might be a little sarcastic here, just a little, right? More on that in a moment, though. Let's put it into a more plain perspective. If a boy says, I want to be a girl, somebody says, okay, you can be a girl. Or the other way around, doesn't matter, right? If you answer a fool with a foolish answer, the fool will think they're wise or smart or even right. What's the correct response to a boy who wants to be a girl or girl who wants to be a boy? No, you're not. You are what you are. You've been designed by your Creator to be the only you there is, and you need to be the best you that you can be. Now, if that sounds offensive to you, be offended. Period. Be offended. The notion that our Creator either makes mistakes or makes someone for the sole purpose of sin is absolutely ludicrous. And, if there was a stronger adjective, I would use it. I could say it's foolish, but ludicrous is close enough. Look up the definition if you don't know what it means. Even an evolutionist should be able to realize that biological beings, whatever the species, are designed to reproduce, and it's foolish to consider that anything or anyone should be something other than what they are. Think for a minute, if evolution were true, And I'm going back to the rabbits here. Okay, let's think about the first rabbit to evolve, right? You had to have a male and a female to reproduce the species. Well, what if the first female rabbit said, you know what, I'm a boy rabbit? Well, we probably wouldn't have any more rabbits, would we? If the first boy rabbit looked around and said, you know, I think I'm a girl. You have the same problem. The species would not reproduce. It's that simple. So you wouldn't have, you know, cottontails, snowshoe hares, all those kind of things. They just would never have reproduced. Christians and Jews should not worry about offending someone when they are able to speak the truth when it is needed to. We're instructed not to argue with foolish people. You know, if someone refuses to acknowledge the truth or they reject the truth for their own perversion, that's their sin to work out with their Creator on Judgment Day. It's not your job to fix it. Someone sent me a video with a question, and they said, I know this isn't right, this isn't correct, but I can't figure out where the speaker goes off track. Well, I was able to tell that pretty quickly in this particular video. And the one who sent it said, I'd love to leave a comment on the video. I just don't know what to say. And my answer to them was the same thing I'm saying. Don't argue with fools. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of energy. Now, I will confess, I know there's things that I do sometimes that might be a little foolish. I try not to, but I know me. I know me. There's some things I do that, I'm going to try it this way, and it just doesn't work. That was foolish. But now I know, right? What's the most off the wall thing I can think of? I don't know. I've never done it, but I know you can't start a fire with water. Well, you can, but it's a long drawn out process. Anyway, I digress. There may be things that you do that can be foolish. And hopefully all of us can work these things out and realize, that was kind of dumb. I shouldn't have done that. Right? The heart of the matter, what I really want to get to is, don't be too quick to answer something foolish with an answer that will turn out to be equally foolish. You need to stop. You need to think. You need to get control of your tongue. And if there's a need to answer with kindness, answer with respect, and answer with understanding. Here's where I could really offer some sarcastic remarks, but I won't. As much as I want to, I won't. I want to, but I won't. Just consider that your answer needs to be thought out, well spoken, and if it offends the other person, allow them to be offended. It's okay to be offended. Sometimes we need to be. There are people in the world who need to be offended. Pedophiles come to mind first. They need to be offended. They need to understand what they do isn't right on a whole lot of levels. It's okay to offend them. It's perfectly fine. But just don't give an answer that you don't fully understand. It will make you look foolish, and the other person is going to say, well, I guess I was right. And depending on the conversation, it's okay not to have an immediate answer. It's okay to tell the person that is asking, you know what, I don't know, but I might know somebody who does know, and they might be able to answer this better than I do. Here's something to remember. Ignorance is overcome with knowledge. But there's no defeating foolishness without pain. Whether it's physical pain, like when you do something you shouldn't do and you wind up getting hurt, or whether it's emotional pain when you say something or do something that is foolish and someone corrects you. You may be the one offended, and it's okay. It's okay to be offended as long as you understand why you were offended. Because if you don't understand why you were offended, well, you're going to make the same foolish mistake over and over and over again until you do. We need to get control of our tongues before we become like the old saying. And you've probably heard this. If you haven't, here's something else to think about. It's better to remain quiet and let them think you're foolish than to open your mouth and prove that you are. Want me to say that again? It's better to remain quiet and let them think you are foolish than to open your mouth and prove that you are. That is something to think about. There's times I wish I'd have stayed quiet. But I wasn't that smart back then. But anyway, that's another confession. Until next time.
Until next time.
We do wish you many, many blessings, everyone.
Yes, we do.